Hello there, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. Sorry, I'm in my kitchen and you can see my ironing board and all the rubbish above. Let's look at pots and pans instead. I'm looking at backgrounds for Christmas cards today, and I thought I'd show you some techniques. I'm going to use 3 techniques on watercolour card, and that is watercolour paint, Brusho, and then embossing powders. So I'm just going to begin. I've cut a quite thick watercolour paper, 6x6. I've got 3 brushes. One's a flat brush, that's a 1/2 inch brush. These are all Winsor & Newton. A fan, a fine fan, and then this is any brush that you can just dry brush with. I have my Winsor & Newton palette, and I'm going to select from those. And for the blues that I want, I'm probably going to want the indigo, the royal blue, possibly this blue. And then for the pinks, I'm looking for perhaps a rose madder, a vibrant, and a deep burgundy, perhaps this one. This one might be a bit too bright for what I'm wanting. That might be, can't remember the colours of these at the moment, but they're the colours I'm aiming for. Let's see. I'm just going to start off just by mixing some general colour then. Fresh water into my palette. I'm looking for a very uneven coverage. I've got lots of water. I'm not looking for a neat edge. I'm hoping for a white edge. And if I want to absorb some, I can dab some off. If I think it's a bit too dark for what I'm wanting, I can do that. Remember, I've got 3 colours here. That looks a bit too much, doesn't it? So let's just scribble a bit. That's all I'm doing with this big brush. Let's try and vary the blues so that we get variety. Dab a little bit off. When this dries, it'll be much lighter, and I need plenty of space for this lot to dry off, don't I? So I'm just wetting. Decided rather than to use speckles of the paint, I'm going to try and sprinkle some Brusho on. These are pigment colours, and I've got purple. I've got a dot on the top to show me what the colour is, and I'm going to sprinkle this on, and I've got turquoise. Oops, let's see if we can get that in. Let's see what that looks like if I sprinkle it on. The pins in the top are going to be very self-evident because a little of this goes an awful long way. And you make sure that when you're using it, you don't get it on anything else. So a few tiny dabs of that. Just sprinkling that. That will either dry with the wet, or I might spritz it with a little bit of water. I'm going to see what happens as that just dries, because this card hasn't quite dried yet. So I might just see what happens when I attach some. Some of these are different than others. Look, now the Brusho, I might put a bit too much on there, but I do like that. What I don't want is for it to dry off. Let's see what happens when I just spritz it. If the card is still a little bit damp, I will get a different effect from this. And what I'm wanting is a little bit more than one dimension, a flat watercolour wash. That's what I don't want. So what I might do then now, let me just finish sprinkling a bit more of this. Always put the cap back on. Always put the cap back on this, because a little bit of this goes a long way. You sprinkle it like pepper. And what I might do now is use this flat head brush, and I might just activate that with a bit of water. So all I'm going to do is just get my brush a little bit wet and tap it. You see what I'm doing? Just tapping with a little bit of water just to activate that Brusho, not to wet it as such, not to wet the whole paper as such, but to tap. You can't see what I'm doing because I'm just off camera, but I am just flicking water now with that fanned out brush onto the paper to activate that Brusho, and that will give bursts of colour. The pigment that comes out of the Brusho is fabulous stuff, and they're in gem colours, so ideal for this. The cards then look like this when they're finished. Now each one is unique. Some are lighter than others. You've always got a very unique splash, which truly makes them individual cards. Look at the difference between this. Some of the Brusho has made this a little bit red, but they're very different. It makes your cards unique. This is what people buy handmade cards for. So I'm going to show you how I turn that background into these backgrounds using the embossing tools that I've got and the embossing mat. And to do that, I'm going to use a Versamark watermark stamp pad, ink pad. I'm going to use these embossing powders. This one is a Ranger, which is Tim Holtz embossing powder in white, and if you can see, that says super fine detail. I've just ordered another one. They're about £6 plus postage. I've ordered that off eBay. And this one is called Silver Pearl. Now this actually hasn't got a logo on it, so I can't tell you which brand this is, but I suspect that this was a Ranger. I've had both of these for quite a number of years now, and I've still got stuff in the bottom of the pot. The stamp I'm going to use is this Urban stamp. It's Urban Stamps by Paper Mania. It looks like this. I don't want to touch it because it's a bit gloopy on the back. It's this one that's Christmas pudding, happy Christmas, and all the fonts are in different orientations, which is exactly what I want for this card. It's a 6 by 6 inch, which is what my card bases are. And just to catch my embossing powder, I'm going to use some of these cupcake shells that I bought in the range. And the other thing I normally use is the anti-static pad, but I tried it, and as you can see, it started lifting some of the Brusho paint off. So I'm not going to recommend that you do that if you're using Brusho, because I don't want that then to transfer to a project in the future. So I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to take my rubber stamp, and I don't want a corner where I'm going to put my main feature to have any of the embossing powder on it. So that helps you save on the cost of embossing powder, and it saves you time and energy as well. So I'm going to stamp this pad up in 3 areas with the watermark design, just like that. And then because this is a 6 by 6, I'm going to turn it over and put it fully down. And whichever way I put it, because the orientation is so different on it, I'm going to end up with a quarter of it without any watermark staining, which is like a glue for the embossing powder to fit on. I'm going to show you on this purple one first because it will show up better colour-wise on camera. I'm going to cover that then in, if you haven't seen this before, it is fascinating. I'm going to cover it with embossing powder, tip it over, tip it off into my, very gently into my cupcake holder, and I missed. You'll see that I'm using my X-cut glass plate for the first time. I'm actually sitting at the kitchen. You see my heat gun is a Dove Craft. I've had this many years. It gets very hot. Use a pair of tweezers or something just to hold the card in place. Don't put your fingers in place. and when it's hot enough, you'll see that that powder starts to work as a white ink, and especially on the purple you can start to see it coming through. I might have the glue gun in place at the moment, but it will become obvious. As it starts to melt, we get a sheen on the powder and it becomes more evident. As I work across, I can see whether it's melting. Let's do the Christmas tree across, and I'm going to continue that round 3 sides of this 6-inch square off camera. So here's the results on blue. This is white. This is the superfine white, and I like that. I then tried it with silver pearl, and I think this is a little more delicate. I like that one too. This is with the sterling silver embossing powder, and that's come out really well. They've all got a different sheen to them. And then this, in the powders from Stamp and Stuff, I had this one which is Pirate Gold, opaque, and I've had this, I must have had it 12 years. This is the effect I've got from that, and I really like that. I hope you can see the sheen on that. Now, although I was talking about cool colours and silver, the ancient Egyptians often used gold and turquoise, 2 classic colours together, and I really like that. And as I've got a lot of this in my stash, I might use that up. And the other thing I had was this one, which is, again, Stamp and Stuff, and it's called Penny Copper, but it's come out quite dull. It might be that I've had this such a long time. I've probably had it about 20 years. It took a long time to melt anything, and I think it looks quite dull. The other thing is I wanted these as backgrounds, and I think that's a bit more in your face. I had to work very hard on melting that embossing powder without setting fire to the card, so be very, very careful when you do it. So I hope I've given you some ideas there of what to do for your backgrounds for your Christmas cards. You can use these techniques and methodologies for any cards that you like. I'm going to add to these cards, and then add these cards to a pre-scored 6x6 hammer quality cardstock with an envelope, and I'll show you what they look like once I've finished them. My ribbons of choice are purple satin ribbon, turquoise satin ribbon, or this little chiffon. It's a silvery sheen on a chiffon ribbon. I buy all these at Innovations on the Wirral, and I'm going to affix them to the back just using this double-sided tape. I brought a selection of die-cut items with me, including sentiments, and I cut these at home before I came using my little sapphire machine. This is white embossing powder on purple with some Chinese roses. This is the effect of the silver on purple with poinsettia. This one is the effect of the silver pearl embossing powder on turquoise with a poinsettia. And this is silver, the sterling silver on turquoise with a poinsettia. And that gold that I had in stock, this was old gold. It's come out rather well, don't you think? So I hope I've given you some ideas there of what to do using some old techniques and updating watercolours to give you vibrant luxury Christmas cards.